Imagine being so powerful in the world of fashion that the industry itself felt threatened by you. So influential that people tried to erase your presence, as if your existence challenged the rules of the world they had built. In the 1960s, the world knew her as Veruschka, a name that sounded less like a person and more like a spell, something magical and untouchable. She wasn't simply a beautiful face, she was a force of nature. By 1970, her face had appeared on over 800 magazine covers. Editors around the globe declared her the most beautiful woman in the world. Photographers would fly her across continents just to capture her in their frames. But beauty alone was not what made Veruschka a legend. What made her revolutionary, what made her truly dangerous in the eyes of the fashion industry, was her refusal to remain just a model. She turned herself into living art. She painted her body into animals, warriors, spirits, and mythic creatures. Suddenly, the spotlight shifted. It was no longer about the designers or their clothes. It was about her. Once a model becomes bigger than the brand she represents, the industry loses control, and that power is both intoxicating and threatening. That power made her untouchable, but it also made her a target. The press hounded her relentlessly. They shouted, demanded, and questioned her in ways no human should be questioned. Her body was objectified, her mind scrutinized, her spirit constantly tested. She was celebrated as a fantasy and punished for being real. And at the absolute height of her fame, when she was everywhere and the world could not get enough of her, she vanished. Who was Veruschka, really? And why did the most famous woman in fashion history simply walk away at the peak of her success? Veruschka's story did not begin on the runways of Paris or in the studios of New York. It began in a world shadowed by tragedy. Her birth name was Vera Gottlieb Anna von Landorf. Her father had been part of the 1944 resistance against the Nazis in Germany and lost his life in the aftermath. After the war, her family was left with nothing. The children were separated, renamed, and moved from one displaced person camp to another. Vera grew up nomadic, never having a true home, haunted by survivor's guilt, a pain she carried all her life. She later recounted visiting the prison where her father was killed, feeling an enormous black cloud descend over her, a darkness that never entirely lifted. As a teenager, Vera felt wrong in her own body. She was too tall, too awkward, with what she called huge claws for hands, constantly tripping over herself. She did not see herself as pretty, and she did not dream of being a model. She wanted to be an artist. That early trauma, that deep sense of displacement, fractured her sense of identity. For Vera, identity was fragile. It could be taken from you, renamed, erased, forced upon you. Before she ever reinvented fashion, she had to reinvent herself just to survive. After studying art in Florence, photographers approached her, but Vera quickly realized the industry did not want the real her. They wanted a fantasy, a perfect image. At first, she tried to play the game, but she soon understood the rules. As a model, you were just a clothes hanger, a vessel for someone else's vision. It bored her. How can I make them remember me? She asked herself. That question marked the birth of Veruschka. She resurrected a childhood nickname, Veruschka, meaning Little Vera, an ironic choice for a woman who towered over almost everyone. She created a new persona, all in black, in a cheap GY coat, a velvet hat, and soft leather boots she could move in like a cat. In New York, she flipped the power dynamic. Models were expected to beg for approval. Veruschka made casting agents wait weeks to see her. Legendary photographers, including Irving Penn, had to wait. When asked for her portfolio, she famously replied, "Pictures. I don't carry pictures around. I know how I look. I want to know what you do." This was not arrogance, it was strategy. She wasn't there to sell clothes, she was there to make images, to create a presence that no one else could replicate. This calculated confidence unsettled the industry. She was no longer a girl seeking employment, she was a myth walking into the room, an event the industry had to earn. Diana Vreeland, editor of Vogue, immediately recognized her brilliance and said, "Put her name right on the wall. Veruschka, you're going to hear from me." By the mid-1960s, she was everywhere. The world called her an Amazon, a 6'1" goddess, and the most beautiful woman alive. At her peak, she earned $10,000 a day, a staggering sum in the 1960s, but the obsession was not with the clothes, it was with her. Fashion hates that, because when the model overshadows the brand, control slips away. Veruschka was no longer selling clothes, she was selling Veruschka. Everything changed in 1966 with Michelangelo Antonioni's film Blow Up, in which Veruschka played herself. Suddenly, the mainstream saw what a fashion model really was, an almost otherworldly figure, hypersexual, untouchable, commanding attention effortlessly. The film solidified her as a cultural icon, and she became a fantasy beyond fashion magazines, embedded into pop culture. The tabloids called her the Naked Countess. Paparazzi stalked her relentlessly, cornering her on the streets of Italy, demanding to know about her personal life, probing into her mental health. Fame, she realized, could be violent. At the same time, she began a legendary creative collaboration with photographer and lover Franco Rubartelli. Together, they transformed her into living art. She became a panther, a mermaid, a creature of myth, her body painted with feathers, metallic pigments, and animal patterns. They traveled to remote locations, using their own money, to create visionary images. These were not fashion editorials, they were staged mythologies. The painting of her body was both artistic and survival. Rubartelli later explained that she carried a deep desire to escape her own body, to become other beings. By transforming into a panther or a mermaid, she controlled how she was seen, rather than being hunted for how she already looked. It was dissociation as survival, performance as protection. Veruschka's work was celebrated by Vreeland, who gave her team unprecedented freedom. But privately, the trauma that fueled her creativity also caused deep depression. She openly spoke of obsessive thoughts, feeling like the embodiment of something dark, and seeking refuge in clinics to survive mentally. She understood the darkness of fame with brutal clarity. By the early 1970s, the industry itself shifted. Vreeland was pushed out of Vogue in 1971, replaced by Grace Mirabella, who wanted practicality, wearability, and realism. Mythic desert goddesses were no longer in demand. Veruschka later said, "She wanted me to be bourgeois, and I didn't want to be that." By the mid-1970s, she walked away from mainstream fashion not in bitterness, but by conscious choice. Commercial fashion had become about selling products, not creating worlds. She did not disappear. She collaborated with artist Holger Tilch on a radical body of work, creating the Transfigurations, avant-garde nude self-portraits where her painted body merged with decaying industrial landscapes. She became an urban ghost, a living sculpture, treating herself as installation art. She continued acting in experimental cinema and underground theatre. In 1986, their book Veruschka Transfigurations, with an introduction by Susan Sontag, cemented her transformation from model to fine artist. In 1990, Veruschka returned to fashion but entirely on her terms. She collaborated with designers like Helmut Lang and Paco Rabanne, who prioritized ideas over commercial perfection. Over decades, she reappeared in campaigns and runways celebrating her legacy rather than youth. At age 61, she walked in the Melbourne Fashion Festival. At 78, she starred in Acne Studios' Resort 2018 campaign. These were not comebacks, they were declarations: a woman's value does not expire with age. Time became her tool. She stopped pretending to be eternally young, using her experience, scars, and wisdom to define her presence. "Yes, I had bags under my eyes, and 30 years later, I'm still working. Same nose, no plastic surgery. That's not graceful aging. That's defiant aging," she once said. Veruschka's later years were defined by clarity, strength, and ownership. She questioned the industry: who owns a model's image? Is aging an end or transformation? Veruschka proved she was never just a face. She was both the artist and the art. She invented the idea of a model as a story, not a mannequin. She showed that beauty could be strange, tall, angular, scarred, painted, aged, and still commanding. Decades later, the fashion world still talks about her. She was the supermodel no one could control. Have you grown up seeing Veruschka, or is this the first time you're seeing her as a real person, beyond the image? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching.